My name is Marie Loren. I want to welcome you all to our 5th session of Big Banter, a Canadian youth-led conversation. It's a National Youth Mentoring Advisory Council event supported by Big Brothers Big Sisters of Canada. For over 100 years, Big Brothers Big Sisters has been making a positive difference in the lives of Canada's youth by developing and implementing a wide range of mentoring programs. Across Canada, Big Brothers Big Sisters has just under 100 agencies supporting 1,100 communities and serving more than 40,000 children and youth. The National Youth Mentoring Advisory Council, or NYMAC as we fondly call it, is a consortium of young people from across the country who have knowledge and experience in mentoring. This youth council is involved in initiatives such as our youth engagement strategy, a collaborative effort between the council members, Big Brothers Big Sisters staff, and external youth serving agencies, which aims to improve mentoring opportunities for mentored youth in Canada through youth involvement. NYMEC's Big Banter series has involved a series of dialogues with members of Parliament on issues relevant to youth. I'd like to now introduce our moderators for today's session. Our moderators for today's session are Angela Sen, the first member of NYMEC's Youth at Large program, and Karine Gauthier, a former Little and current member of NYMEC and the Board of Directors of Big Brothers Big Sisters of Canada. Angela's interests lie in the intersection of business and policy, and she is dedicated to providing business education to youth. Outside of her academic interests, she is an avid reader and creative writer. Thank you, Angela. Karine has engaged in public speaking, hosting, and event planning for Big Brothers Big Sisters at the municipal and national levels over the last decade. Aside from public speaking, she also enjoys politics and hopes to become a member of Parliament in the future. She recently graduated with a degree in political science and communication from the University of Ottawa and is now a public servant working in diversity and inclusion. Thank you so much, Karine. And now I'd like to turn it over to Angela and Karine.
We're so excited to be here with you all today. And we have two speakers who are joining us for our panel session, Women in Politics, Advice for the Next Generation. The first one is Heather McPherson, the NDP Member of Parliament for Edmonton Strathcona, who was first elected in 2019. Congratulations. She serves as her party's Deputy House Leader, Critic for International Development, and Deputy Critic for Foreign Affairs, Women and Gender Equality. Mrs. McPherson previously served as Executive Director of the Alberta Council on Global Cooperation and has been part of a Canadian delegation to the United Nations.
Great, so next I'll be introducing our next speaker, Ms. Jagdeep Sahosa. So she is the Conservative Member of Parliament for Calgary Skyview and was also first elected in 2019. She serves as her party's Critic for Women and Gender Equality and is a member of the House Status of Women Committee. Ms. Sahosa was called to the Alberta Bar in 2008 and operated her own law firm before seeking office. She's been an active volunteer in her community, including with organizations such as the Calgary Immigrant Women's Association and the Elizabeth Fry Society.
Perfect. So thank you again both for being here and taking some time out of your very busy schedules. We'd like to ask you a few questions, and as our moderator mentioned a little bit earlier on, we'll be taking some questions from the audience. So if anyone wants to add anything in the chat, please don't hesitate. We'd love to hear what you think. So Angela, if you want to get started on those questions.
Great. So the first question for both of our panelists is that you're both serving your first term. So I guess the first question that we have for you is, what has been your biggest challenge since becoming a member of Parliament?
Would you like to start, Jag, or would you like me to jump in?
We'll work together. Go ahead.
Well, I can only imagine that the biggest challenge for me is the same thing that Ms. Sahoda will say is the biggest challenge, and it is COVID-19. I mean, there really can be nothing that has been a bigger challenge. And for those of us who were elected in 2019, it's become our norm. You know, we've now been members of Parliament longer during a global pandemic than we've been members of Parliament outside of a global pandemic. I remember for me, and I'm sure the same as Ms. Sahoda, but when I first got elected, I thought Alberta's economic recovery was going to be our biggest challenge. And it is still an enormous challenge that we have to face. But I would have said, you know, in February 2020, that rebuilding our economy, rebuilding the the job market for Albertans was going to be my biggest challenge, or the biggest thing that I'd be working on in this government. And a month later, it was making sure that people had enough money to survive, making sure that people were able to access the healthcare that they needed, the small businesses could survive and were getting the supports they needed. So very quickly, it became clear that the biggest impact of this parliament is definitely COVID-19, and we're still in the middle of it, as everyone knows. Is that fair? Is that fair,
Yes,
Jag?
exactly what I was gonna say. We didn't really get any, I think maybe a month of normal parliamentary duties, and then we were in the middle of pandemic. But some of the challenges that came our way, I'm in many ways happy that a lot of the MPs who were there much longer also hadn't dealt with something like this. So we were all in it together in every sense of the word. And the challenges changed over time. Like Heather was saying, it went from being the focus on economy and jobs to sometimes very basic things. Like some of my constituents, for example, were stuck in out of Canada. Like me, I was working according to their time zones. For example, if they were stuck in India or Pakistan, which is about 12 hours ahead of us. So it'd be day there and night here. I'd be calling them in the middle of my night, right? And the challenges were to stay open and be safe and continue to provide those services that people needed. And I always say to my staff, usually people don't like coming to our offices unless it's so important and something, it's the kind of like the last door they're knocking on. So we better be inside to open it when they're here. So that's one thing I have learned. Challenges, what I thought would be the challenges have changed, and they keep changing as the second wave comes, third wave comes. We may be able to deal with the pandemic, but overall, it's in many ways a great opportunity as well, I would say, to have learned from this and to become true parliamentarians, to listen to our constituents, take their voices, their concerns to Ottawa. It's been an honor. That's how I would say it.
Absolutely.
Well, your dedication to your constituents is admirable, of course. And while we're on the topic of our dear friend COVID-19, I do have a question about how the pandemic has evidently affected women more in the workforce. How do you think we can resolve this?
Why don't you take the lead on this one, Jag? We'll alternate. How's that?
Okay, yeah, that's fair. Actually, we did a study, COVID. Well, at FIVO, we call it the Status of Women Committee. We did a study on how COVID impacted women, not just women in general, but women of color, immigrant women, because a lot of women from racialized communities, for example, or cultural communities also work at lower paying jobs, but that risk is high. For example, it could be cashiers, for example, or housekeeping. A lot of it, how do we solve it is how we focus. We need to have a focus on how we move forward in this case. And that's where the studies come in. We hear from the stakeholders. We hear from women themselves who tell us what they would like to see changed. Once again, it's not a change that we can write down on a piece of paper and that's it. Change has also have to have the ability to change, to be fluid enough that with the circumstances it will change. It's to look to the future and say, look, a lot of these issues existed before, but COVID-19 highlighted it. So it's time to focus on that. It brought it to the surface, and now we can focus on it, and our recovery will have to deal with that as well.
Well, and I think some of the ways that recovery, I totally agree with everything that Ms. Sahota has been saying, but I think one of the things that the recovery needs to include is it needs to include really substantial investment in childcare. We've had childcare promised by the Liberal government for decades, and we still don't have it. The the conversation that used to be very much as a wouldn't it be nice to have kind of conversation has become a very essential conversation. You know, we're hearing from chambers of commerce, we heard from the Royal Bank that the recovery for women will be dependent on making sure that there is adequate childcare. But I also think it's important to highlight what Ms. Soda was saying about how women have experienced this pandemic differently than men, but different women have experienced this pandemic differently. So marginalized women that are from racial minorities have experienced this pandemic and will experience the recovery very differently. I do a lot of my work, my parliamentary work, is in terms of foreign affairs and international development, and just the impacts that we know that this will have on women around the world. So of course we need to be fighting and working very hard to ensure women in Canada are supported from all different communities and backgrounds, but also women around the world are supported, because the impacts on women in terms of violence, in terms of early marriage, loss of education, loss of income, inability to recover adequately after this pandemic is pretty dire. It's definitely something that we also need to keep an eye on.
Great, thank you so much for the insight. So on that topic, I'd just like to ask the two of you, what do you think is the greatest obstacle for women seeking to run for office and get elected, and how would you address it?
Well, the greatest obstacle for women to get elected is first of all, they have to be asked. First of all, they have to be encouraged to put their names forward. But some of the other obstacles that they face is that when women put their names forward, that they need to be given the opportunity to represent in a riding that they're able to win in. You know, that's very important. There are seats that are much easier to win. I guess there's none that are easy to win, but there's some that are easier to be successful in. That's really important. There's barriers that prevent women from running. You know, the ability to put your name forward. I think the common thing is that a woman needs to be asked 8 to 12 times and a man needs to be asked once. So maybe twice, depending. So I think there's things there, but there's also pieces that we need to look at as a society. Like the violence that women experience when they run for office is very real. Whether that be online, whether that be verbal, whether that be institutional and systemic. And some of that needs to be changed if we want to have equality within our House of Commons. We're not even at 30% right now of members of Parliament in our House of Commons. So if we want to have equality, if we want to have equal numbers, some of those things really do need to be addressed.
And I would agree completely here. We don't necessarily agree this much in the House, but right today we're on
we do all the time. It's just not on every issue. Most issues we do.
I would agree. It takes a lot of asks. A lot of times you have to ask a female to you know, run for the office, because there are challenges in there. There's like, you need family support. At the end of the day, if you don't have that, that's difficult. You need to have that support so you can go home and be yourself. That's very important, because we can be challenged outside, but when we go home, we should have that safe place. That to me is very important. So having the support of your family and your friends over time, like my colleague said, it's also the ridings that women end up in. They're not necessarily winnable ridings, and we need to be more aware of that when we are picking women to run. They should be going to ridings that are winnable. And I'd agree, you don't even sometimes have to ask a man to run. They're ready to run. We also as women think, is this the right age to run? Men don't necessarily think that. What the right age is. It's about jumping in and then staying at it. Like, you know, don't give up, because when I ran for my seat, it took me 7 years to win. I didn't give up, but it's easier said than done, to be honest. Like, I can sit here and give you advice on that, but it's also how passionate you are about issues that you want to give voice to and take it to Parliament. So those are the things that will push you that way. And I would say even reach out to women like ourselves, and say, hey, like to know what the challenges are. How do I get nominated? What, not necessarily the good seats, but where do I run? How, and what the process is. It's also being getting familiar with the process, and not jumping in without knowing, right? And we are more than happy to help. We're looking for women to run for our parties. So reach out to your local MPs or anybody else, any other woman or man.
Absolutely. Well, and do you mind if I do notice that Denisha has written like for some of those concrete steps? Can I jump in, Angela? Would it be okay to jump in with some concrete, like some of the things that I spoke about were the hate and the violence that's directed at women online, for example, through online platforms. So the parliamentarians have a role. We need to be putting legislation forward to stop that. There needs to be legislation put in place. I sit on the Heritage Committee. That is the committee that will be looking at hate legislation coming forward. Things like that are very, very important. We've seen it happen in other countries and it's been successful. So that's a concrete step that we need to take. I think that parties should have some sort of a quota or a system in place to make sure that there is candidates from all backgrounds, that there are candidates that are representing the broad population of Canada are represented within our elected representatives. I think the House of Commons has a role to play in terms of ensuring how people participate is easier. So that there is childcare services available, so that in order to run, you don't require to go without a salary for a year, for example, because many women can't afford to do that. They don't have the options of doing that. I think that some of the things that we can do is we can I think in terms of actual concrete steps, I think we also need to start seeing a diverse population within the House. Like the more women that are actually elected, the more likely that people see themselves in those elected representatives. So we need to have more women elected from diverse backgrounds. One of my colleagues is now the youngest parliamentarian that is the parliamentarian for most of the world. She has the most. She is the parliamentarian representing more of this planet than anyone else, and she is 27 years old, and she is an Inuit woman. And being able to see her in that position allows for people to recognize parliamentarians don't all look like white dudes in navy blue suits, to be honest. They need to look like what Canada looks like.
I agree. I agree with what you were saying, Heather. That's exactly, when I was running before I ran for member of parliament, I ran 2015 for MLA, and young girls in my riding wrote paper on me because, and they showed me, they wanted to take pictures with me because they could identify with me, who I am, that it's possible. That's what we need to show to women and girls, that anything's possible. And we are the role models for that, as in like, we made it, you can too. But it's on us as well to reach out and do panels like this where we have these discussions. This is very important to start that process.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you for answering that question. And you can both expect an email from me in your inbox within the next week. There is one thing that Heather had mentioned about social media and the rise of violence against women on those platforms. Do you believe that this could dissuade younger women from running for office?
It's your turn. Is it my turn or your turn? I can't remember. I can go. Do you want me to go? Okay. So yes, absolutely. I think it dissuades people from putting their names forward. It certainly was something that came into play with me. I mean, I'm a mother of younger children, and I had a great job. I loved my job. I traveled all around the world. I did international development work. I loved what I did. I worked on human rights issues. So of course it came into my mind that I'm going to have a thick skin. I'm going to have to put myself out there. And the problem with current social media is that there's no accountability. So it's very difficult for somebody to come up to you and say something to you to your face. You know, it's much easier through Twitter, through Facebook. And one of the things that I find really challenging, to be honest, is that if you want to comment on my policies, if you want to comment on my priorities, if you want to comment on what I do and say in the House of Commons, then I'm all in, I'm all ears. But if you want to comment on whether or not I look good in red, if you want to comment on whether or not I'm wearing not enough lipstick, or whether I laugh too much, or whether I don't smile enough, I have no time for that. I have no interest in those comments, but those are what female politicians and women have to deal with that men don't. And so I think that, of course, that impacts women's ability. I guess I always think that all female politicians must have a little bit of that stubborn streak, that we won't be intimidated, we won't be silenced, because that's the only way that you can decide that you'll raise your voice here, because there are a lot of pressures that are trying to tell you that you don't belong in at these tables. And so unless you're prepared to fight and say, no, I do belong. I belong for myself, but I belong for every woman who's coming after. I belong for every woman who worked really hard to start this process. Unless you're prepared to do that, it's going to be pretty hard.
And I would agree completely. So the experiences are across the party lines for women are very similar. I'll give you this example. I was wearing this top one day and I gave a speech in the House, and my staff is pretty good. They hide some of the negative comments from me, but the comment was, "What are you wearing? You look like an old lady or something." This is what the comment was. They hit it, but like, it's our looks are up for criticism. Like, we can have the best day in the House in terms of what we're doing, but they'll criticize us on our looks or what we are wearing. So we have to be thinking about that all the time as well. I pay a lot of attention to what my necklines are doing. I just don't want that kind of criticism, because that means all the work that I did just didn't get acknowledged at all. It came down to me, how I looked. And it is disturbing that people still think that just because we are politicians and we're in the public eye, that anything they can say and hide there's, like, my colleague said, there's Twitter, Facebook. It's hard to, when they make these comments, they don't realize there's a person on the other end uh, reading those, or they have feelings too. But I would also say that you don't necessarily have you're aware of the situations that can come your way, but over time you build that thick skin. It's the experiences. You have to let it go. Sometimes you're ready to give a speech, you just read a bad comment, you're like, well, I gotta go do that, do my work first. So that shouldn't be a discouraging thing for women. And I know our young women are so strong and so aware of what needs to be done and how they need to handle themselves. And I would just say, don't let that stop you. Like my colleague said, it's about the women who have done so much work. Because of them, we are here, and we want to make sure we pave the path for you guys. So when you get here, so some of the hurdles we faced are not there for you guys. That's the hope that we have.
Thank you so much. On that subject of young female politicians, I was just wondering, if you had one piece of advice that you wanted to give them, what would that be?
Can you repeat the question, please? My volume was a little low, so I didn't hear it properly.
Oh yeah, no worries. So I was just wondering if you could give any young female politicians entering politics one piece of advice, what would that be?
There's no one piece of advice, first of all. There's a lot of advice that, based on my experience, I would say, don't get discouraged. You might not win the first time. And when you're walking on that path, you might be walking alone for a while, because the seat that I'm at was a seat held by a liberal before me, and then he was independent. But because a lot of people knew that this was a liberal riding and I was from the conservative, I may not win. So people didn't want to waste their time door knocking with me or helping me out. And I spent a lot of time. My commitment to myself was that I'm going to do this and I'm going to win it. And I'm going to put in my 100% or 2000%, uh, and then have no regrets. It was also my kind of last, it was my third time. After third time, it's kind of like people don't look at you. They're like, well, she runs every time. For every level, so we're not even going to consider her. So it was, you put your heart and soul into it, just like anything else, just like you guys study for exams and trying to get into school. It's just like that. But a lot of times, um, you don't always have the support that you need from your family and friends. I hope you get the family support, but from friends and constituents, you don't always get it. I have much more support now. I'm going to have much more helpers and door knocking with me. Before, it was like every night I door knocked from 5 p.m. to from 5 till around 8:30 every night. And I did that for 10 and a half months. I started in January. It wasn't even called. I said, don't even worry about calling election. I'm going to start my door knocking. And that's what sometimes it takes. It takes that commitment from yourself first. Nobody's going to walk with you if you don't have that. I'm not going to show up today because I feel like resting while my 10 volunteers are waiting. No, it's about commitment. And towards the end of my campaign, I door knocked for 10 and a half hours a day with only 30-minute break, because this was not a winnable seat. So I was like, I'm not giving up. This is do or die sort of situation. So just like anything else in life, if you want it really bad, go for it. And don't think of all of those negative things that are out there. Put your name. Karina, you better be getting ready for this.
I'm going to knock on my neighbor's door right after this.
That's it's so interesting because, of course, my seat as an NDP is, so for those that don't know, I'm the only non-conservative in the province of Alberta right now. Actually, the only non-conservative between Winnipeg and in the Rocky Mountains. So similar to Jag, to Miss Sahota, like you have to work hard. But I would say, if my advice was, it would be to do it. I mean, I would also say that you will hear from people that it is hard and that it is a lot of work, and it absolutely is. It is the hardest job, without a doubt, that I have ever had. And just to get the job is really, really hard. But it's incredibly important work. It's incredibly rewarding work. So doing it is the thing. Being brave and putting yourself out there and doing it is the thing. Now, one of the things that I often give as advice as well is that I don't think you need to plan to be a politician. I don't think that I sometimes think the best politicians are the ones that have followed their heart to do something that they loved within their community, that have followed their heart to whether that be environmental issues or human rights issues or within the business community, whatever that is. That gives you this background or this ability to bring all of your knowledge into your role as a parliamentarian. I think that's also really important, is to do what it is you want to do what it is that you love. And then if that also brings you to politics, that's that added bonus. I think that's what my advice would be. But it is a really great job, isn't it, Ms. Sahota?
Yes,
I love it.
Me too. And I do want to say, I just want to add to that, don't worry if you don't have the support, and don't give up. There's no reason. We don't always succeed first time at everything we try. That's one thing that it's important. And people come around when they see your commitment and your hard work. People sometimes even change parties, as in they'll come support you as a person. They'll be like, you've been at my door second time now. Okay, fine, I'm just gonna vote for you. You know what I mean? Like, you start to build those connections and relationships with people. And politics is nothing more than that. It's relationships. Keep building them, keep building bridges. Don't ever burn any bridges. Another thing that I have learned Like it took me 7 years. I always have a smile on my face. They could be saying the worst thing to me, and I'll be like, yeah, I'll keep that in mind. I've learned because people don't forget how you made them feel. If you disrespect them in any way, you
They
haven't done
remember.
yourself any good or help yourself at all. So just you know, people have everybody's fighting a battle. Just keep on telling yourself that everybody's fighting a battle, and I'm just gonna however whatever was said to me, I'm just gonna take it lightly and move on. Like not hold grudges, build bridges, don't burn them. If somebody said something, move on. Like positive. That's that's another thing you learn to do in politics.
And don't you think too, like one of the things door knocking, I remember when I first started and I was looking down the pipes at having to door knock for 120,000 people. And I thought, I'm not sure I'm going to love this. Like the more you do it, it's actually really fun. Like I love the options, the opportunities to talk to so many people. And like, I really enjoy it. It doesn't feel like work. It's long and it's long hours, but you'll never know your community better. You'll never know what happens in your community better than when you're knocking on those doors and talking to so many of the people that live in your community.
I agree. I know some of these people where they live because I door knocked so many times. I'd be like, that person lives there, the greenhouse, this
Oh, they
person.
have that dog. They have.
Yeah, because it's also relationships. And you know, when they call me now, they're like, remember when you came to our house when you were door knocking? I'm like, hey, you remember me too. You know, it's pretty cool actually, the relationship once again.
Yeah, it's great.
I love how you brought up relationships and how important they are, but I'd like to ask you a question on behalf of Chen from Greater Vancouver about your relationships at work. Have there been any instances of misogyny from colleagues that have affected the work environment and how you view yourself?
I think that is it me to jump in here? Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and many of them are microaggressions. I mean, there's situations where we see the way things work within the house. There's always going to be some of that. I will say, like I mentioned before, I'm kind of in an interesting situation in that I fly back and forth to Ottawa when we can with planes full of my conservative colleagues, and so I've learned. I mean, I'm more than happy to work with anyone if they're working on the same thing. So there's lots of colleagues that I've worked with that are in different parties from all the different parties that I work with really, really well on issues that are important. I mean, you're watching today that Ms. Sahota and I get along and understand the issues the same way on a number of different fronts. I'm sure it wouldn't be 100% aligned, but on many of these different issues. And so when it works together, we work very well together. In terms of facing misogyny, though, yeah, you know, I think there is the way the media portrays us, that you know, studies show that we are asked less to speak to media. We are asked less serious questions when we do speak to media, that there is media bias in how they report about our interventions within the House. Absolutely. If you look at all of the parties, and every party is trying very hard to do this. So I'm not going to say one's better than the other or anything like that, but every party has typically gives some of those key positions are not held by women. You know, we have 4 parties in the House of Commons. Not a single one of them is led by a woman at the moment. I'm really proud of Canada that our finance minister is in fact a woman, because that has not happened before. If you look at how the makeup of the committee that Ms. Sahota was speaking about in terms of women and gender equality, it is predominantly run with women, where women know the issues that are facing them. Men need to know more about that. So there's a number of different sort of microaggressions that need to be changed. You know, a perfect example, one of my colleagues who I was speaking, we were having a meeting the other day, and I mentioned that we haven't hit that 30% mark of parliamentarians that are women in the House of Commons. And his response was, no, really? And this is a man who was actually sitting in the House of Commons with the parliamentarians and not recognizing it. So yeah, there's lots. I think there's a lot that's being done. I think the world is shifting and we are moving in the right direction. I would say we have to move faster. We need to go further, but I think that the recognition of the problem is the first piece of that, I guess. Ms. Sahota, did you have anything? I'll pass it to you.
I would agree. What my colleague was saying, we're working really well today.
We really are. Now let's get into energy.
Yeah. Look, it's hard. I can't sit here and say it doesn't happen, but then also we have to look at it. How do we move? How do we change this? And that's where we come in. If you, for example, bring something up to your male colleagues or something, if you and you want them to acknowledge that they were wrong or something's happening, it does change people's perspective. Sometimes it's so ingrained in them that they don't even know that this is happening. So I would agree. We are all women on the status of women committee. Yeah, we talk about how even to have, except one person, one liberal, sorry, is a is a male, but we talk about gender equality. Even you cannot have that conversation without having men and every gender involved in that. That's very important. All of these conversations need to take place with everybody involved and being aware. And I think, what like I said before, it's we're making small changes, us as politicians right now. So when you come, it'll be a better world for you guys. So we're going to continue to work on that and stay positive.
Well, let me thank you in advance then. I appreciate all the work you both are doing right now. And I think I have one more question before we wrap things up about your colleagues as well, but perhaps not only in politics, perhaps you've had a mentor in any of your careers prior to this one or in this one as well. And how has that affected your trajectory to politics?
My mentor is my dad. My dad introduced me to politics at a very young age. I was about 6 years old when I told my dad I want to be a lawyer and a politician. He'll never let me change my mind on those. So it didn't matter if God difficult or not. He's like, you're doing it because you told me. So in terms of like my dad's commitment, like I said, he introduced me to politicians because my dad was very involved in politics, which meant that we had a lot of people, if anybody was running for a leader of the party or counselor or MLA or MP, they would come to our house, and I really enjoyed those interactions with them. I'm sure they were just taking me lightly, but to me, and I internalized it. This is what I want to do. A lot of it is also you think it's a glamorous life for a politician. You look good, you go to these events, and then you come back, you take pictures and all that. In reality, it's a lot of hard work. But I used to see that, I'm like, wow, that's the life I want to live. But over time I internalized it. It became my passion as well. And right now um, I would take on anybody as a mentor. Look, there's so many causes in the world, and I say this to my staff. I say, I'm learning a lot of things that I'm not comfortable with necessarily, a lot of the wrong in the world. And I might not be able to change all of it. And some days it does, or some nights I'm awake at night because of it. It bothers me. It bothers me to my core. I like to change it. But I'm working towards it. That's all I can do, right? Mentor to me can be a woman who told her story and I learned something from her. Like it's about experiences, the stories that they share that give me encouragement to move further, to do something for them, to change things for them. That, like, I see the potential in every person, how they can teach you so much. To me, mentorship is teaching, learning, taking in, and moving forward with that. And that to me can come from anybody. I'm sure I'm learning something from you right now, and from my colleague who I didn't get the same interaction with her because we didn't have the normal year, like I said. But we're learning from each other. I'm sure we're taking notes, and mentally, subconsciously, that we're like, hey, that's pretty cool, or I did that too. That's, to me, is mentorship, and it can come in any form. And especially at a younger age, whoever teaches you something or guides you right. And I would also say to your parents, it's important. They never really want anything bad for you guys. I personally think that if I did not have the support of my dad, I lost my mother when I was fairly young. So I was raised by my grandparents and my mother, my dad. So like anybody who teaches you something, your parents are your, go to them. It's important to, if you have something you want to share, they're your best friends. They are really, because they have your backs all the time. And go to them. Those are your mentors. That starts at a young age. Well, you know how they say that you're blank slate when you're born, and you know, you learn as you go on from your parents, from your society, everything. That's who we are as human beings. And so go to your parents. That's your real mentors from the very beginning. And we are product of our society and our families. And you can see it at a later age. You're like, oh my God, I do exactly same as my mom and my dad. Same things, right? But go to your teachers and take, you don't have to have a mentor just for the name or the sake of it. Learn from people, and reach out to those who are doing it. I tell my staff, I'm like, if somebody wants to come and shadow me as an MP, I would love to give them that opportunity, because it's important. Try the job that you want to do. What's the best opportunity than that? I didn't get that, you know, and but that's something. It excites me to know how much potential you guys have, how many opportunities you guys have, and how willing we are to help you guys and guide you with open arms, to receive you and say, hey, um, come and work with us. That, to me, I think I got a little too excited. But I'm really happy to be doing these panels, because I'm sure we do end up um, influencing someone, motivating someone, and that, to me, at the end of the day, is the whole purpose of all of this.
That's a perfect response. It's really, I don't want to talk after that one. No, that's exactly right, Ms. Sahota. That's the finding the people that you can learn from, and the having the curiosity is such an important part of this. The only thing I'll add, I mean, I think that you said it just so well. The only thing I'll add is that for me, a big part of this is, of course, what I learned from my daughter, and wanting to be somebody that my daughter would be proud of the things I say, like, so the influence that I feel from her when I stand in the House of Commons, when I make decisions on whether to run, when I choose what policies and what things are important to me, I think is really important. I'm sure this is the same for Ms. Sahota, but we see the young people, the young women that are engaging with us, that are engaging with politics, that are engaging in their communities, and we, at the moment, we want to be your voice in Parliament until your voice is at that table.
Great, thank you so much. Those were both really wonderful answers. So I guess I'll just ask one final question to wrap everything up. And I know we covered quite a lot of topics today, but what do you think would be one main idea or piece of advice that you talked about that you want attendees to take away from this panel?
So, I mean, realistically, the thing that I would like every young person, young woman that is thinking about going into politics, that is interested in politics, that is interested in contributing, whether that's at federal, municipal, or provincial level, is to do it, is to actually just do it. There are ways that any one of the parliamentarians you can reach out to, and we'd be happy to talk to you about some of the ways to make that happen. There's lots of support that's there for you. Of course, there's barriers. Of course, it's terrifying and scary. You are putting yourself out there, and that is always hard. That is always scary. You may not win the first time. That's scary. You may not win the second time. You know, like there is challenges to that. But there's a lot you have to offer, and there's a lot that your community needs from you. So if this is a path that you believe in, then you need to do it. You need to put in the work. You need to do the steps that are necessary and make that happen. And that's really the main thing to take away from any discussion like this. The how to do it, the when to do it, the pieces that make it possible are all really important, and there's lots of people that can support you and help you with that, but you have to make the decision to do it. You have to make the decision to go for it, to be brave and put yourself out there, and it's really worth it. Ms. Sahota, anything else on there?
There's no right time. So if you're waiting for that right time,
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know when that is. Right time is now. Right. So yeah, so just do it. Do it. We're here for you. Like, have I said it enough times today? Reach out. I gotta take 2 or 5 people from this panel here. I'm just kidding. But yeah, put in your name, and also don't be scared. A lot of things that we have learned over the last year and a half since we've been member of parliament is we're learning from the women who came before us, who are member of parliamentarians like for longer, 2 terms, 3 terms, whatever. There's people always ready to teach you, women always ready to help you. Not saying everybody's going to be like that, but then that's real life too, right? So there is no right time. Jump in, and but also reach out to right people who are willing to help you and not pull you down. There's so many things people can say that will give you negative vibes, and you're like, I don't know if I should do it. Like I said before, men don't think about it. Men don't say, oh, I'm gonna wait till I'm like 29 when I put in my name. They're like, well, at 18 I'm ready to go. Right? We need to come with the same mindset. Said, I'm ready to go at whatever age you're ready to go. You will know that internally when you're ready to work hard, ready to show your commitment, and ready to build relationships and keep them. That's it. There's no, I don't know if I could tell you what the recipe for success is. Other than that, there's nothing really. And until you throw your name in, you won't know. Like, and then I'm the type of person, I don't have necessarily a bucket list, but I also don't want to be on my deathbed and keep thinking I should have done this. I'm going to do it. I might not succeed the first time, maybe second time, but I'm sure I won't have regrets. That's another thing. People think, oh, now I have a small child, can I do it now? Like, is this the right time? And then the child goes to school, is this the right time? Then teenager, is this the right time? Now I'm getting too old, is this the right time? Just throw in your name, just do it.
Well, thank you so much, Karine and Angela. I think you did a great job on moderating this today. And thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to introduce our local agency representatives who will do the thank yous to our MPs, MP McPherson and MP Sahota. I'd like to introduce Jennifer Booth. She's the manager of communications and stakeholder relations at Big Brothers Big Sisters of Calgary and area. I'd also like to introduce Denisha Balu Shivji. She's the manager of development and communications at the Boys and Girls Clubs, Big Brother Big Sisters of Edmonton and area. Jennifer and Denisha, I turn it over to you.
So on behalf of Big Brothers Big Sisters Calgary and area, I would like to thank both Heather and Jag for your wise words, your candor, and your just ability to really encourage everybody on this call and on this webinar. I think that politics in general can be very daunting, and I think that with the words that you've spoken today and the encouragement that you've had and speaking real about your challenges that you've had, I think that it really hopefully will motivate people. And I think from the Big Brother Big Sister organization and the agencies, I think that's one of the things that we really like to do, and instill on our mentoring coordinators to work with the mentors, to really empower all the littles via the matches that they have and the connections and the developmental relationships that they create to really set all these littles up for success and to be future leaders. So I really appreciate your words today. It went by so fast. I'm sure you could talk for hours, but really appreciate it on behalf of Calgary. So over to Edmonton.
Thanks, Jennifer. I just really want to thank Heather and Jag for this inspirational hour. I know I'm a bit older than the youth that are supposed to be part of this panel, but I have to say that I was just really inspired as someone forgetting my role with the agency, but as a former little sister in the agency, and someone who ran for elected office a few years ago as well. I wish I had this. I wish I had you both before I decided to run, because I think it's just so, yeah, what you guys have shared today, the tangible things, but also the bigger picture and what you want to accomplish and both of your motivations to be doing what you're doing. And the fact that you're right, you've led in a pandemic, which is hard to imagine that's been pretty much your whole career as MPs so far, has been leading in a pandemic. So it's got to get easier post-pandemic, I'm assuming. But really just wanted to say thank you, because I think, like I said, having our young people, especially young women and diverse young women, look up to you guys and see themselves in you, and not only see themselves in you, but having you extend your hand and tell them that you will mentor them and you will reach out to them if they need the help, if they're thinking about this career, is invaluable. So I just want to say on behalf of our agencies, on behalf of Big Brothers Big Sisters of Canada, thank you for taking the time to be here. We both know, we all know you're both very busy, but the fact that you've made the time to talk to our young people and thinking about the future generation in politics, especially women leading that generation, is just, it's inspiring. So thank you for an amazing midweek treat.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. We loved it, right? Yes, thank you.
That was awesome. That was really fun. Thanks.
Great. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. Today's talk was on women in politics, advice for the next generation. And I just want to thank Jennifer and Denisha for your kind words. I think that MP Jag Sahota, MP Heather McPherson, it was a wonder and a treat to hear from you, as has been said. And again, congrats as well to Angela and Karine on running an excellent seminar. I think that this has been a wonderful opportunity for all of us to hear, and you guys did a great job moderating and facilitating this conversation. So thanks, everybody. This ends our awesome Youth in Office virtual event. Join us next time. Sign up online, check out bigbrothersbigsisters.ca for more info. And thanks, everybody, and have a great night.